Picking a side in the sanctuary state debate, the San Diego County Supervisors who want to roll back the law and the voters who disagree.
But I'm trying to deal with a human crisis. We ought to act in a way that is just not scoring political points.
Governor Brown speaking out about National Guard troops at the border, the balancing act between border security and immigration reform.
And then you would just turn it on and it starts recording locally onto a micro SD card.
Diagnosing stomach disorders, a high-tech solution from UC San Diego that could help doctors find out what's going on inside a patient's stomach. KPBS Evening Edition starts right now. Good evening and thanks for joining us. I'm Ebony Monet. San Diego County is the latest local government to take a stand against California laws that shield certain immigrants from deportation. KPBS Frontiers reporter Jean Guerrero has reaction to today's vote by the Board of Supervisors.
Board Chair Kristen Gaspar announced the decision to side with the Trump administration instead of the state of California in the early afternoon. She says the main concern is safety.
And San Diego was really a model of excellence before. We were safer before SB 54.
She pulled a large stack of letters that she said were from community members urging the board to join the Trump lawsuit.
It was really quite surprising to receive the volume of correspondence that we did very early on from people that were actually in support of the county pushing back on the state, and that's represented by the stack there.
She says that although the deadline for filing an amicus brief to join the lawsuit has passed, they're anticipating an appeal, at which point they could take action. The vote came in the early afternoon after a lengthy public comment period, with Gaspar identifying more than 52 requests to speak, 12 in favor of joining the Trump lawsuit and 40 against. The groups disagreed on whether sanctuary laws make San Diego County safer by limiting cooperation between local law enforcement and federal immigration officials. Supporters of the Trump lawsuit say the laws allow immigrants who commit crimes back into the streets.
One of the problems we're seeing here is there are areas and pockets throughout California, if we're not careful, are becoming no-go zones, okay? We're looking at something that's happening in Europe coming this way.
But opponents of the Trump lawsuit say sanctuary laws make communities safer by encouraging immigrants to report crimes rather than hiding from police.
If you join this lawsuit, what would happen is you'll jeopardize our public safety.
Supporters of sanctuary law rallied outside the Board of Supervisors meeting, urging the board to vote against the lawsuit. The board's decision means San Diego County joins about a dozen places in California standing against state sanctuary laws with the Trump administration. Jean Guerrero, KPBS News.
President Donald Trump is not happy with an apparent setback in getting California National Guard troops to help with border security. The president criticized Governor Jerry Brown this morning and suggested crime would rise if the state does not cooperate. The president also said border wall plans are moving forward in San Diego. Trump visited prototypes last month. Funding for the border wall project has not been authorized. Governor Jerry Brown hasn't said much publicly about the back and forth with the Trump administration over the National Guard, but that changed this morning in Washington. The governor spoke in a wide-ranging forum at the D.C. Press Club on sending troops to the border and sanctuary policies. Here are some of those comments and a heated exchange with a Fox News reporter after the event.
Just to clarify, is California sending 400 National Guard to the border? And if so, what will they be permitted to do? What will they not be permitted to do?
Well, I sent a letter that outlines my objectives. And that number, it could be 200 or 400. That's being worked out. There's very good communication between California's National Guard and the National Guard headquarters. We got plenty to do with respect to our borders. We've got problem of guns, cartels below the border, human trafficking, guns going south. So there's a lot to do. I outlined it in my letter, and I think we're pretty close to an agreement. There's quite a little bit. There is a difference. I mean, the other three Republican governors have a political affiliation that I don't share, but I do. I am concerned about our borders. I'm concerned about the shipment of drugs, not only overland, but on the shores of California, and human trafficking. And I'm concerned about the guns that are going south from Arizona and California and Texas. So those are things that we're already working on. We have 50 guardsmen near the southern border. We have a couple hundred guardsmen throughout the state dealing with some of these same problems. So it is a very logical next step to add a couple hundred more or more than that. And the Guard is chomping at the bit, ready to go. So I think we'll get there. The truth in California is that we have a couple million people who don't have lawful documentation. Some of them might have gotten here yesterday, very, very few, but many have been here 5, 10, 20 years or more, and they've become integrated into our economy. And they're doing important work, picking food, working in restaurants, working in construction, not to mention other industries where these millions of people work. So to scare the hell out of them, put them on the run, as it were, is very disruptive to the economy, very disruptive to a lot of very conservative employers and people in agriculture. Now, given cities, they have certain sanctuary rules that are different than the state. If you read that state rule, you're going to find out it's very measured. I substantially modified the original provisions. We're going to have some court lawsuits, and they'll further delineate it. And they may find some changes. But I'm trying to deal with a human crisis. We have people being deported whose children don't even have any parents. We have businesses and communities being disrupted. At the human, I might say the Christian level, we ought to act in a way that is just not scoring political points. And I quite find it kind of disgusting the way some of the officials and others in the media and in politics, they're all exploiting human beings. And I, for one, think it's wrong. Here's the problem. I think Fox News exploits this issue. We have criminals that do horrible things all the time. Which ones may be documented, which ones aren't, I'll be glad to look at that. But we have a very strong law enforcement community in the state. And I think to scapegoat the immigrants by these very biased stories, I don't think... look, I want to... With all due respect, I want to protect people. And for you to say that we don't care about victims is really a calumny.
It's not me. It's 12 cities and counties that are doing that, sir.
You just had an hour.
A Supreme Court ruling on immigration and deportation is getting attention for who sided with liberal justices. Neil Gorsuch, who was appointed by President Trump, was part of the 5-4 majority. Their ruling invalidates a federal immigration law that allows for the deportation of immigrants convicted of violent crimes. The justices ruled it overly vague and unenforceable. The original case involves a man from the Philippines who pleaded no contest to burglary. Tax filers will get one more day to turn in their forms. Late this afternoon, the IRS announced a 24-hour extension due to a glitch with the agency's website. The new deadline will be midnight tomorrow. San Diego's Registrar of Voters says it needs more poll workers for the June primary election. Workers are needed for more than 1,400 polling sites countywide. The Registrar's office says it especially needs workers who are bilingual in Spanish, Filipino, Vietnamese, Chinese, Arabic, and Korean. There is some training involved and a stipend is provided. More information is at sdvote.com. 16 candidates are running to replace Republican Darrell Issa in North County's 49th Congressional District. KPBS North County reporter Allison St. John says the latest campaign fundraising numbers show who has the most resources leading up to the June primary.
In a race that covers parts of both San Diego and Orange counties, it's tough to get your name out, especially when you haven't held public office before. Of the 16 candidates running, 8 have raised more than $200,000 and stand a chance of winning one of the top 2 spots in the June primary. Among the Republicans vying to replace Congressman Darrell Issa, the frontrunner in the polls is California Assemblyman Rocky Chavez from Oceanside. As you can see, he has raised the least money among his Republican challengers, but he has also spent the least, just $18,000, on his campaign, relying instead on his name recognition as an elected official. Brian Marriott, the mayor of San Juan Capistrano, has raised the most, but much of it was a loan of his own money, and he has already spent much of it. Among the Democrats, the candidate with the best name recognition, Doug Applegate, is a front-runner, even though he has raised the least. Mike Levin of Orange County has raised the most from individual contributions, while Paul Kerr and Sarah Jacobs have contributed significant personal wealth to their campaigns. Kerr has spent most of his, while Jacobs has more than $1 million cash on hand left heading into the final weeks. This is the time she will need it for TV ads and mailers, says political consultant Tom Shepard.
Absentee ballots go out the first week in May, and by then the candidates who have had limited name ID have got to have gotten themselves to a place where those early absentee voters know who they are and are willing to select them. So I think you're going to see significant spending over the next couple of weeks.
It remains to be seen whether money will change the equation before the June primary, 7 weeks from today. Alison St. John in the North County Bureau, KPBS News.
Solana Beach is working to fill city council seats after 2 recent resignations. 1 seat was filled last week. As Matt Hoffman reports, applications are closing this week for the remaining spot.
Last week, the Solana Beach City Council had just 3 members, and by next week, they hope to have a full slate of 5. The council is opting to fill the 2 empty seats instead of holding special elections. Lisa Huebner was recently appointed to fill the vacancy left by Mike Nichols, who resigned on March 12th. And the city is currently accepting applications to fill a vacancy left by former Mayor Ginger Marshall. She abruptly resigned on April 5th. Yesterday, before a KPBS story aired, just 1 application had been received. As of today, they now have 5 applications. The deadline to apply is on Thursday, and the council plans to appoint a 5th member by next week. To apply, you must live in Solana Beach. A council position there pays $712 a month. Now the appointees will serve through at least the end of the year because the 2 council positions will be on this November's ballot. Matt Hoffman, KPBS News.
Starbucks is announcing a plan to have all of its employees receive anti-discrimination and racial bias training. This is the latest response from the company after 2 African-American men were arrested in Philadelphia. The men were sitting inside a Starbucks to wait for a friend when an employee called police to say they were trespassing. The men were eventually released. Starbucks will close more than 8,000 U.S. stores on May 29th to conduct the training. The National Institutes of Health says up to 70 million Americans are affected by digestive problems. Diagnosing exactly what's wrong can be a challenge. KPBS health reporter Kenny Goldberg shows us a device from UC San Diego that could help provide some clues.
Imagine a temporary tattoo with electronics embedded in it.
In 2011, UC San Diego bioengineer Todd Coleman developed some thin, flexible sensors that could measure electrical activity in the brain. That same year, his father died of pancreatic cancer. His grandmother died from stomach cancer years before. That got Coleman to thinking.
Are there electrical rhythms of the digestive system? Maybe we could try to measure them with these new devices. And maybe this could help solve some of the problems that have been associated with my family.
Researchers had used external sensors to measure electrical activity of the digestive tract before, but they failed to take one crucial factor into account.
Every person's stomach is in a slightly different location on their body, and people were not taking that into consideration in terms of where they place the electrodes. So if you're placing the electrodes far away from the stomach, it's not surprising if you don't pick up anything meaningful.
Coleman also discovered that the stomach's electrical signals are quite faint, about 10 times weaker than the heart's. So Coleman had to develop some extremely sensitive hardware. Coleman's team began testing a device in 2013. Their current version is a bit smaller than a cell phone. It uses 6 electrodes that are attached to different parts of the abdomen.
We know where my stomach is, and then we could place the other leads accordingly.
One of the first guinea pigs was postdoctoral fellow Armin Garabons. He tested the device on himself for more than a year.
And then you would just turn it on, and it starts recording locally onto a micro SD card. After about 24 hours, we could turn it off, take the data off, download it, and analyze it on the computer offline.
Garabon says interpreting the data is a challenge because the device picks up signals from the heart and respiratory system.
And you have to basically try to separate out only the stomach activity and moreover do some new analysis to look at things like the spatial propagation and the frequency and the speed of that signal.
I'm really honestly hoping we can use this new technique.
Pediatric gastroenterologist Hayat Musa says the standard method of monitoring digestive activity relies on a long catheter that's inserted into the stomach.
To place those catheters, we have to put the patient, the pediatric patient, under anesthesia, and to place a stiff catheter through the nose or the mouth. It's not very comfortable for them when they wake up. And after we place it, we keep it for at least 8 to 10 hours.
Musa tested Coleman's device on 11 of her patients and said it performed as well as a catheter. Researchers can use data from the device to produce what's called a spatial histogram.
So this type of readout we think is something that's more valuable.
These show, for example, what fraction of the time waves in the stomach are moving toward the small intestine. In other words, it shows how often the stomach is working properly.
If you take a look at subject C here, notice that the waves are really propagating all over the place. They're equally likely to be propagating in any direction. And so for this subject, it's not surprising that they have a lot of nausea, because half the time is pushing in the opposite direction.
The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention says in 2015, digestive problems prompted more than 32 million visits to the doctor. It turns out many digestive disorders have the same symptoms.
We're on a great path, but there's still a lot of work to be done.
Coleman hopes to perfect his device so that one day it may be able to pinpoint the cause of a person's problems.
Stay tuned, there will be a sequel.
Kenny Goldberg, KPBS News.
California is a step closer to advancing net neutrality laws. The state Senate is working on a bill that will block internet service providers from favoring websites to grow ad revenue. The FCC has decided to repeal those restrictions at the national level.
Yeah, that internet service providers would be able to block websites or slow down web traffic to certain websites and pick winners and losers. It's not right. We need to be able to decide where we go on the internet, not have that decision made for us.
California's net neutrality bill has a few more steps to go, including a vote by the Senate Judiciary Committee next week. Strong winds in the high desert created a big mess for a neighborhood in Victorville. Video from the Daily Press shows hundreds of tumbleweeds stacked up in front of homes. Wind gusts reached 60 miles per hour in the area on Monday. This particular street is next to open desert, leaving no barrier between the homes and the tumbleweeds. The wind has calmed down, but there is a chance of rain and snow for local mountains. Aaron Calandra has details in tonight's forecast.
Well, I hope you enjoyed your day today. It was a bit warmer today than it was yesterday, less windy. And looking across the county, not much happening here as far as precipitation. That's going to change here in a couple of days. We do expect to see a couple of showers, but not tonight, not today. Things are looking pretty quiet across much of California, but notice way to the far north, coming off the Pacific, we do have another storm heading in our direction. So for tonight, 54 degrees. It's going to be nice and clear for pretty much everyone, including Borrego Springs at 51 degrees, chilly in Mount Laguna 34, Alpine at 40 degrees, and Chula Vista around 49 for our low. Now here comes the jet stream on Wednesday. With that, we're going to see dropping rain and even snow. It's not going to hit us Wednesday, later on in the week. So for us, it's still going to be very pleasant and warm. Up. Oceanside, 68 degrees with beautiful sunshine. San Diego at 68 and Alpine 71. Mount Laguna in the 50s and Borrego Springs around 84 degrees, maybe a cloud or two around. Now on Thursday, a shower is possible along the coast. Temperatures at 63. It's also going to be kind of breezy, gusts up to 20 miles per hour. Friday, a nicer day. Sunshine around 69, and by the weekend, we are in the 70s, staying pretty beautiful with sunshine. In the interior areas, it's going to be cooler on Thursday, less likely to see a shower, but temperatures drop down to 63. It'll rebound, and by the weekend, we're talking in the 80s, and again, a bit breezy with that cool down. In the mountains, we could even see a bit of rain, perhaps even a snowflake or two. Those overnight lows are around freezing, so that certainly could happen. Friday, it's going to be a sunnier day at 58, and for the weekend, reaching 71 by Sunday. And in the deserts, again, a bit cooler by Thursday. Another cool down with that front moving through, a bit breezy as well, gusty at times. On Friday, it's going to be sunny and warmer at 84. And for the weekend, we are seeing temperatures all the way up to the 90s. For KPBS News, I'm Erin Calandra. Ebony, back to you.
Today was homecoming day for the last of the more than 400 horses evacuated during the Lilac Fire. They were rushed from the San Luis Rey Training Center in Bonzo last December. Half of the facility was destroyed during the fire and 46 horses died. The survivors have been kept at the Del Mar Thoroughbred Club since then until the burnt down stables could be rebuilt.
These are the new temporary barns. We're calling them Pavilion 1, Pavilion 2. And they're going to house 224 horses. And we have the horses came in this weekend for these.
Staff say some horses are still recovering from burns, but they're back to racing. A changing environment in Louisiana has scientists using new technology to fight coastal land loss. Part of their plan includes building a $4 million replica of the Mississippi River. AP reporter Stacy Plassons has the story.
This Louisiana fishing village, once surrounded by miles of lush marsh and centuries-old live oaks, today just a shell of the paradise Clay Boudreau remembers as a child.
The marsh was so healthy and so established, there was no open bodies of water like you see now until you got to Barataria Bay. And now here we are, 50, 60 years later, nothing's alive other than the trees that we planted in our yards.
Coastal residents like Boudreau know all too well the dead trees are a fatal sign the salty waters of the Gulf of Mexico have crept in.
Salt water has gotten in them to the point where it's not surviving.
But help may soon be on the way. Using a massive river model larger than a basketball court, scientists are getting an idea of where to divert nutrient-rich river water into Louisiana's marshes to begin the process of restoring rapidly eroding estuaries like Lake Hermitage.
Not only can we model the flows and the river stages or the water levels in the Mississippi River, we can also model or simulate the transport or the movement of the Mississippi River sand down the river. And we can do all of that in roughly 1 hour to replicate 1 year on the river.
The high-tech model, made of high-density foam panels, replicates every dip and turn of the lower Mississippi River. It took more than a year to construct, with a price tag of about $4 million. Researchers say the investment has already proved invaluable, giving them the tools to start reversing Louisiana's land loss while helping others around the world.
We've had folks from China, we've had folks from Bangladesh who have a major river flooding problem in their nation. They're looking at ways to living and working with the river.
They're also learning what not to do.
You know, I think there's an important lesson as to not levy a system like this because that could have long-term consequences, and there's no better place to look at that than Louisiana.
The model will be used with existing computer data to help isolate sites for planned sediment diversions, like the Mid-Barataria diversion not far from Lake Hermitage.
We're going to see the beginning of the growth of everything like it used to be.
Though Boudreau knows he won't see a full restoration in his lifetime, he's happy knowing future generations just might. Stacy Plaisance, The Associated Press, Lake Hermitage, Louisiana.
I'm Judy Woodruff. Tonight on the NewsHour, Pennsylvania Representative Charlie Dent says he's leaving Congress now, speeding up his departure as one of the many Republicans heading for the exits. That's at 7, right after Evening Edition on KPBS.
A family spokesman says former First Lady Barbara Bush has died. A statement issued on Sunday by the office of former President George H.W. Bush said she had elected to receive comfort care over additional medical treatment. Doctors have been treating her for Graves' disease, a thyroid condition. She watched both her husband and her son elected to the White House. She is survived by her family, including 17 grandchildren and 7 great-grandchildren. She was 92 years old. People lined the streets today to say goodbye to a San Diego Marine killed in a helicopter crash. The procession for Gunnery Sergeant Derick Holley traveled from Miramar National Cemetery to Claremont, where a private service was held. Patriot Guard riders and fellow Marines were part of the tribute. Holley was 33. He was one of 4 crewmen from the Miramar base squadron who died in a helicopter crash near El Centro earlier this month. A signature voice of NPR was silenced for good today. Carl Kasell has died. He was 84.
From NPR and Chicago Public Radio, this is Wait, Wait, Don't Tell Me, the NPR News Quiz. I'm Carl Kasell.
Kasell joined NPR's All Things Considered in 1975 and was there for the very first broadcast of Morning Edition. Later in his career, Kasell became a judge and official scorekeeper for NPR's news quiz show, Wait, Wait, Don't Tell Me. He retired from NPR in 2014 and died of complications from Alzheimer's disease. Now, here's a look at what we're working on for tomorrow in the KPBS newsroom. On Morning Edition, following up on a controversial horse rescue operation and how they regained their ability to raise money as a nonprofit. And on Midday Edition, solving the opioid crisis with a mutation. Meet the UC San Diego grad student behind the next big idea tomorrow on KPBS Radio. You can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org/evening edition. Thanks for joining us. Have a great night.